Hi everybody, this is Coach International Master Roderick Nava, and today we're going to look on their games happened in the round number 2 of the ongoing Norway Chess 2022 between Super Grandmaster Wesley So of USA and World Chess Champion Magnus Carlsen of Norway. The first one is in standard time control, the other one is the Armageddon. So let's get started. Wesley played d4, Magnus played d5, c4, c6, Slav defense, then knight f3, knight f6, knight c3. So this move for me was a surprise move by Wesley because in this position, mostly he played e3 directly to support the c4 pawn and to avoid the main line of Slav defense. But then here, surprisingly, he invites Magnus to capture his c4 to go to the main line of Slav, but Magnus doesn't like that line. He simply played e6, the semi-Slav defense. And then now e3, of course, to develop and to protect directly the c4, knight bd7, queen c2, bishop d6, bishop d3, very typical developments, castle, castle, and Magnus played h6. So yeah, this move is a rare line. Book line, but a rare line. Because according to the database, the main line here, most often times, black takes the c4 pawn. Then bishop takes c4, then black will go to b5, bishop e2, then bishop b7, followed with a6, rook c8, then c5 to bring a lot of pressure to the c file. So that's the typical idea of the semi-Slav. But in this position, let's go back. Magnus played h6 and b3. Yeah, so Wesley realized that black doesn't take the c4 pawn, so he played b3. Then if black will take the c4 pawn, then he's going to take with the b pawn. So there's no b5 anymore. A typical pressure-giving idea with semi-Slav as black. And now, Magnus played e5. He strikes immediately the center. So this move was a rare line again, a rare idea. Because in this position, according to the database, most often times, black played b6, then followed simply with bishop b7, rook c8, then c5. Yeah, to bring pressure to the c file. But let's go back. He strikes immediately with e5, then c takes d5, force. Then knight takes d5, another surprise move by Magnus. So this move belongs to a novelty idea. So there's no book anymore because according to the last game happened, black took the pawn with c takes d5. Then white went knight b5. All right. So the game went draw in this position. Then let's go back with knight takes d5. Novelty. Knight takes d5. C takes d5. Then d takes e5. Knight takes e5. Then we have knight takes. Bishop takes. Then Wesley played bishop b2. Offer an exchange with to dark sword bishop. Then Magnus played queen f6 to force Wesley to capture on his bishop. Then bishop takes, queen takes, then rook ac1 to take advantage on the c5 control. So, and when it comes to pawn structure realization, white has a little bit advantage because black has a IQP, isolated queen pawn. So it could be a long-term target with rook fd1, bishop e2, bishop f3, something like that to attack the d5. But that's not easy, especially against world champion. So here, Magnus played bishop d7 in order to bring his rook to c8 to neutralize the c file. Then immediately Wesley played queen c7. He took advantage the c file. Then capture, then bishop c6, of course, to protect the b7. And then now rook c1. So to strengthen the c file, and immediately Magnus neutralizes the c file. Rook fc8, capture, and then now king f1. Of course, in the end game, you should activate your king. Okay, especially there's no queens anymore in the board. So now king f8 also, king e2, bishop d7. Yeah. So he offered an exchange. Then Wesley took the exchange. Capture, king d2. So maneuver with king c3, king d4. But yeah, king e7, king c3, king d6, then b4. So in this position, attacking the isolated pawn for me is no longer effective because there's no rook anymore. So I think that's not enough to play king d4, then bishop e2, bishop f3, something like that, because black can simply play something like b6, then bishop b7 to protect the d5, and the position still fortress. The white king cannot penetrate somewhere on the board. So here b6 was played, then king d4, a5, then b5, lacks the queen side, and bishop d7, a4, then bishop c8, he goes back again, then f4, then f6, f5, then Wesley lacks again the king side, then bishop b7. Then g3, waiting move, then bishop c8, bishop c2, bishop d7, then g4, he protects the f5 pawn, then bishop c8, bishop b3, attacks the d5, and bishop b7, simply to protect the d5. Okay, so like what I said, so the position or the force of white here is not enough to attack the d5. Bishop a2, bishop a8, bishop b3, bishop b7, then bishop a2, then the game went draw in their classical game, standard time control. Now, let's proceed now in their Armageddon game. So this is the part of the most crucial game. White has 10 minutes, then black has only 7 minutes, but white should win. It's a must-win situation. So if Magnus managed to draw this game, then he will get 1.5 points and considered win in this round. Then Wesley will get 1 point. Alright, so let's proceed. Wesley played e4, and Magnus played e5, knight f3, knight c6, then bishop c4. He opened up with the very sharp Gyoko piano. So for me, this is a very good choice of opening rather than bishop b5 in an Armageddon, where bishop b5, as far as we know, there's a lot of equal chances, like, for example, Berlin variation. Yeah, it's quite hard to play in an Armageddon. That's why Wesley went bishop c4, Gyoko piano, then knight f6, attacks the e4 pawn, then d3, simply to protect the e4. Then Magnus played bishop c5, main line. Bishop g5 was played. And yeah, this line or this move belongs to a fifth line, because according to the database, the main line is c3, the second line is castle, and the third line is knight c3, the fourth line is bishop b3, and the fifth line is bishop g5. Alright, and he played bishop g5, he went there, and Magnus immediately neutralizes the bishop on g5, and of course bishop h4 to maintain the pin and pressure. Then now d6, simply to protect more the e5 and to give life for the light squared bishop. And then now c3. So yeah, at this point Wesley wants to bring back with typical structure to control the d4 and b4. And Magnus simply played a6. What's the idea of a6? If white will go to b4, then he will simply go back with bishop a7, a safe square for his bishop. And at the same time, the a6 wants to play b5 at some point, or even knight a5, taking the bishop. So knight exchange with the light squared bishop, something like that. So white has no bishop b5 check tempo anymore with bishop a4 then bishop c2 because of his a6. That's why Wesley played a4 at this point. So he played a4 to prevent the b5, and the possible knight a5 is no longer effective because he has bishop a2 simply retreat on the safe square. So at this point, yeah, Magnus played bishop a7 to avoid the b4 tempo attack. Then knight bd2 developed. Then queen e7 was played by Magnus. So at this point, normally black castles. But then he played queen e7 here, something behind this move. So let us see. Then Wesley played castle, then now g5. That's the meaning of waiting move queen e7. He wants Wesley to castle first, then he will play g5. That's the meaning behind his queen e7. So forced to play the bishop g3, then knight h7, intending to play h5 to attack the bishop or to bring attack in the king side generally. Because, yeah, black cannot play h5 immediately because of h4. Of course, white cannot take the g5 because of h4. Then black has a very strong trap to the bishop. So at this point, white will play forced by h4, then g4, then knight g5 or knight h2, something like that. Okay, so let's go back. He played knight h7, then b4. Yeah, intuitively, Wesley smells something dangerous on his king side. That's why he played b4 in order to counter in the queen side. So knight f8. So maybe Magnus wants to bring his knight maneuver to g6, then h5, h4, something like that. And then Wesley immediately played b5 to bring the very fast attack as much as possible. So knight a5 attacks the bishop. Then he played Wesley played bishop d5, provokes the c6, and yeah. So Magnus does c6, and then now bishop a2. So then Magnus proceed with knight g6. Of course, maybe this is one of your question. What if Magnus captures the b5 pawn? Capture. Black has an extra pawn, but yeah, black has an extra pawn, but it's a weak structure. It's a weak pawn structure. And actually, white has also bishop takes f7, check, sacrifice, queen takes f7, then rook takes knight. So attacking the b5 also. And if black will capture the f2 pawn with check, sacrifice, rook takes f2, then winning the rook, but not in the position because white has knight takes e5, discovered attack to his queen, to the black's queen. Then if queen e6, then queen h5 check. Of course, if king d8, then we have knight f7, double, winning the rook on h8. And if king e7, then still knight f7, rook g8, knight takes h6, attacking the rook there. Then we have knight f5 check, rook f7, etc., etc. So meaning it brings a fatal situation for black. Okay, so let's go back. That's why straight away he played knight g6, then rook b1. Of course, Wesley wants to concentrate on his counter in the queen side, and Magnus took the pawn, a takes b5, then c takes b5, rook takes b5 with tempo attack, then knight c6, then now bishop d5. Yeah, it looks very good because it's a centralized move. But according to the computer engine, this move was bad. So, yeah, according to the computer engine, Stockfish played king h1, maybe to avoid the pressure there. But in the human eye, I think it's quite annoying because of the coming h5. Then the computer plays h3, something like that. And if g4, then knight g1, something like that. But it's quite annoying in the human eye. So Wesley played bishop d5, then h5. Then now Wesley forced to play h3. Then now g4. Capture, knight h2 force. Then knight f4. Magnus wants to bring a lot of pressure towards the king side. And then Wesley played d4. Yeah, for me, it's a good move. Because to block the diagonal pressure. And of course, black couldn't take the d4 pawn because of the hanging knight on f4. So at this point, yeah, Magnus played knight h5 to pressure the bishop. And Wesley played knight b3 to strengthen the d4 more, to support the d4 more, to block the bishop diagonal. And then Magnus played knight d8. Yeah, according to the computer, yeah, it gives a little bit favorable evaluation for white. Look at the evaluation there. Plus 0.51 by Stockfish 15. So according to the very strong computer engine, better was knight takes g3, then f takes g3, then it follows with queen g5. Yeah, so intends to play queen e3 check. Yeah, then capture the pawn on g3 or even queen h5, attacks the h-file, something like that. Okay, so that's the better version. But let's go back. Magnus went knight d8, then rook a5 to pressure the bishop, then knight takes g3, capture, queen g5. So Magnus wants to attack the e3 square, and immediately Wesley played rook e1. Yeah, to avoid the queen e3 check. Then now Magnus activates his knight with knight c6. So maybe another question is, um, why Magnus didn't play queen h5 to attack the knight, because white has simply knight f1. Then if queen h1 check, then simply king f2. Then there's no continuation of attack. So that's why he played knight c6. Then Wesley took the knight, capture, then queen a1 to bring more counterplay in the queen side. So yeah, so very good counterplay by Wesley. And rook b8 to counter with the knight on b3. So Wesley captured the bishop, rook takes knight, and queen a2. Another strong move by Wesley. So attacks the rook, and at the same time with x-ray attack towards the f7. So that's why Magnus played rook b7 to block the threat. So he took, capture, then queen a7 attacks the bishop again. So he played, Magnus played bishop c8, then queen c7 attacks the bishop again, and also with pressure with the d6 and c6 capture. Then Magnus decided to play castle because there's no way to play anymore with like a bishop d7, something like that, because white will play queen b8 check, then black will force to play queen d8, then queen takes d6. So the queen now is in passive square rather than the g5 very active square. So white is winning in this position. So let's go back. That's why Magnus played castle and then knight f1. Yeah, why knight f1? To prevent the coming queen d2, to avoid any complications that black can do. All right, so knight f1, and then Magnus captured the d4, c takes d4, then queen f6, rook d1 simply to protect the d4, c5, because at this position, in this position, the c6 is very hard. No, it's very hard to defend or to support. That's why Magnus decided to play c5 and also to destroy the very solid control of white in the center. So Wesley captured the pawn, capture, queen takes c5, bishop e6, then knight e3, of course, to activate the knight. Rook c8, yeah, to bring the rook into the battle, and queen d6. Now queen g5, threatening the knight, and he offers an exchange of queen. So queen f4, and Wesley hopes for queen takes f4, then his bad pawn structure will become very good. There's no double pawn anymore if Magnus accepts the exchange, but Magnus went queen c5, yeah, in his idea with to retain the pieces, to complicate as much as possible. But then he missed the e5 move, very strong move for white, because to disconnect the support on the g5 square, then now white has the chance to play queen g5 check, yeah, to attack the king side of Magnus. So in this position, according to the computer engine, better was f6. But it's quite annoying to the human eye because, yeah, it looks like this position with double pawn 2. So symmetrical double pawns and with an extra pawn for white. So maybe Magnus wants to play more and he tries a lot of possibilities in order for him to win. Wesley played e5, so let's go back. Then rook a8, then queen g5 check, king h7, then king h2. And immediately Magnus played rook g8 to attack the queen, and queen h4 check, king g7. And in this position, this is the most critical position in this game. Can you please guess the brilliant move that Wesley has been played in this position? So I'll give you a couple of seconds. You can also pause the video to think and find the best move. Start. Thank you very much for your time. Wesley played knight f5. Excellent move, sacrifice with check. Then Magnus forced to capture the knight. Otherwise, if he will play something like king g6, then queen takes g4, king h7, then mate, queen h5 check. Checkmate. All right. Then if king f8, then we have rook d8, also checkmate. Machas in my Tagalog term. In my native language, machas. All right. So let's go back. Bishop takes f5, then queen f6 check, king h7, queen takes f5 check, king g7, then queen f6 check. And in this situation, Magnus resign. Why? Because if black will go to f8, then white has rook d8, machas. Then if king h7, a little bit more moves, but after queen takes f7, check. Rook g7, queen h5 checking g8, rook d8, then forced to cover with the queen, but very simple for white. Just simply capture, and winning for white. Alright, and after queen f7 check, if black goes to h8, then we have rook d7, threatening queen h7 mate. The only move is queen c2 to prevent that. Then, very simple, queen f6 check, rook d7, still machas, checkmate. Alright, that's why after queen f6 check, Magnus resigns the game, and it means Wesley won the round number 2 battle. Okay, so now I will update you in the standing. So this is the standing where former world champion Vishwanathan Anand of India, the comeback, the return of the comeback, the strong tiger of India, went lead after round number 2. He won consecutive 2 games. He defeated MVL of France, and he defeated yesterday Vasilin Topalov of Bulgaria. And Wesley on the second spot, Wesley So with 4.5 points. Then Anish Giri of Netherlands with 3 points. And tied with 4th to 5th placer Magnus Carlsen and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov with 2.5 points. Wang Hao and Tari tied with 2 points. MVL and Rajabov with 1.5 points. And Vasilin Topalov with 1 point. Alright, so I will update you in the most awaiting round number 3. So we're gonna look on the most interesting games there, and I will update you again in the standing. Alright, for now, so I hope you learned from this game. Thank you very much for your time watching this video. If you haven't subscribed yet in my YouTube, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell all in order to update you, to notify you in my future uploads. Alright, thank you very much once again. This is Coach International Master Roderick Nava. Have a nice day.